And you have bashed the nutmeg to pieces because you are that strong.
No.
A little bit lower. A little bit lower.
Oh, it's hot. Hello everybody, my name is Paddy and I'm a librarian with the National Library Board, and you are watching From Book to Cook, the cooking show where we learn about Singapore's history through food. In today's episode, we will be looking at a special noodle recipe from 1969 from a cookbook found in the National Library. Titled The Proof is in the Eating, this recipe book was published in conjunction with the Eat More Wheat campaign in the late 1960s. With us today to tell us more about the cookbook and the campaign is Christopher Tan. So let's go meet our special guest for today. So hi Christopher, thank you for coming onto the show with us.
Hi Paddy, thank you, my pleasure.
So you are a cooking instructor, an award-winning writer. You also are an avid collector of old cookbooks. That's why you brought one from your collection today to show us.
Yes, the proof is in the eating. This is a book I bought many years ago before I knew what it was all about. This was connected to a campaign called the Eat More Wheat campaign in the 1960s. In the late 1960s, there was a rice shortage. Dr. Toh Chin Chai made a public statement encouraging people to eat more wheat products in order to help alleviate the rice shortage. And this became a campaign. It snowballed. Radio Television Singapura, they organized 2 cooking competitions for the public. Members of the public submitted their best recipes, and this cookbook compiles some of the winning ones and some of the other recipes.
So this campaign, you mentioned a rice shortage during that period. Why was there a rice shortage during that period?
Rice production since the mid-60s had been on a slight decline, and because of bad weather in Southeast Asia, droughts, flooding, rice farmers were having it hard, so there was a lot less rice to go around. I think the impetus of the whole Eat More Wheat campaign was to get people to adopt more wheat foods into their diet so that the staple of rice would be less stretched.
Was it a very far-reaching campaign?
In the early 70s, it kind of petered out. I believe they did a survey in the early 70s. They surveyed like 900 households to ask whether they had changed their diet as a result of the campaign, and I think only like 16 to 18% actually did.
So that's not a lot.
It's not a lot. I think one of the reasons why this campaign didn't really stick as such was that it took a little bit more time and a few more extraneous ingredients to make a wheat dish palatable for the Asian palate, as opposed to rice. Many of the recipes are for deep-fried dough ball or fritter type foods, and still other recipes are for noodle type foods. Some of them are so unusual they can't really be categorized easily into any of these. I'm just trying to find, here we go. So that, for instance, there is this recipe for chikoli, which is a Bora Muslim dish. And it's you make a wheat dough, you cut it into diamonds, you briefly deep fry them, and then you cook them in a stew.
These measurements here look like measurements that I'm familiar with. It just talks about ounces, the numbers.
Yeah, we have a whole mix. There are some recipes here that use quantities in ounces and katis. So a kati is roughly 600 grams, and one kati was 16 tiles. In the old days, even things like weights and volumetric measurements, we had fluid ounces, imperial ounces, katis, tiles.
It must have been a nightmare actually, converting everything. Is that why people end up just doing everything by eye and by feel? They agak-agak, because there's no way I'm going to be able to do the maths in my head converting all these things.
Maybe partly. For viewers who may not understand what agak-agak is, agak-agak is the means by which you adjust to ingredient variability.
How did you stumble upon this book?
I was just browsing at one of the second-hand bookshops, and I happened across it and I thought, this is unusual.
Yeah.
This is interesting. The recipes look very unique, and something that is even rare for today. It's in 4 different languages. Our 4 official languages: English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil.
Can you tell me more about the recipe that you chose? Why did you choose that one, the one that we're making today?
Yes, so the one that we're making today is this one. Milk noodle soup. I chose it because, firstly, it could be followed, unlike a lot of the other recipes. And secondly, because it is quite unusual. It's handmade noodles. But I found this was interesting because the noodles are made with evaporated milk and egg in the noodle dough, which is not common at all. And just to point out that it was submitted by a Mrs. Chua, and from the spelling of her name, it might be that she's Indonesian Chinese. And we know that traditional Indonesian cuisine, because of the Dutch colonial legacy, they use a lot of dairy products.
Well, I am very excited to try this milk noodle soup. And I guess we can talk more about it when we create it over in the kitchen. Of course, I'll be there to help you with an extra pair of hands.
Great.
I'll be fully at your disposal. So, would you like to head over now to the kitchen? We
Yes.
can get started on it. Christopher, now we're here in the kitchen and we'll be making Mrs. Chua's milk noodles.
Milk noodles.
So before we start, you want to tell us a bit about the dish itself?
It's quite interesting. It is a very Chinese soup seasoned with onion and dried shrimp and dried mushrooms.
Okay.
And pork and tomatoes. So it's a very typical southern Chinese kind of soup. To shape the noodles, she just says use a sieve, which could be anything.
Right.
And you know, I tried a sieve. Of course, a sieve like this will not get you noodles,
yep.
right? I tried a chendol press. Okay, no, cannot. I tried a few other, I tried a different kind of chendol press where you press it down rather than scraping the batter across. No, cannot. We will talk about what I finally settled on later.
Sure, yes.
Okay, let's get to
Right.
the noodle batter.
Yes, there were two components, right? The noodles and the soup. So
Yes.
we're working on the noodles first.
Yes, so we're going to start the noodles first, fully cook the noodles and then set those aside while we make the soup because the soup only takes a short while.
What goes into the noodles?
I'm using 2 flours. Now Mrs. Chua says just flour in her recipe. And we don't know what kind of flour. We know it was wheat flour because it's
Yep.
Eat More Wheat campaign.
Yeah.
We don't know what the protein level was like. We don't know how fine the flour was. It probably was the kind of standard plain flour
Okay.
available at that time.
Yep.
In those times, flour was usually slightly lower in protein than it is now. We had less flour shipped in from those northerly countries like Canada, North America, that grow high protein wheat. So it's probably a bit softer. So to kind of replicate that kind of flour, I have a mix here of regular plain flour, so modern all-purpose flour, and then pastry flour, which is lower in protein. So combined in this proportion, we have roughly about 1 part plain to 3 parts pastry flour. We get the right consistency,
I see.
I've found.
So the protein amount in the flour helps determine the consistency.
Determines the springiness and the strength of the noodle. Okay, so I'm going to sift these into a bowl just to get out any lumps.
Sure.
And what's interesting is that this sort of synergy between the egg and the evaporated milk and the wheat proteins, it gives you a springy noodle without having to add anything alkaline. Before I move away from this, I'm going to get you to crack the nutmeg.
Sure.
And grate this. And this is a traditional old-fashioned nutmeg grater.
Yep.
Okay, European style. It has a lid and then a compartment at the top.
That's handy.
Yeah. So you put, once you finish your nutmeg, you put it inside, flip the top, hang it on the wall. And you have bashed the nutmeg to pieces because you are that strong.
No.
No, we can still grate this. That's no problem.
Is that okay?
Okay. So you see, so these the nutmeg and bits of shell.
Oh, I can smell it already.
Yes, it's so fragrant, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Yeah, we meant to do that so we could smell it.
And you were saying nutmeg was used a lot in Indonesian cooking.
Well, it's indigenous to Indonesia. It's from the Sunda Islands. It's where a lot of spices come from, as well as things like cloves. I will whisk all my liquid ingredients together. And we have plain water.
Okay.
And I'm going to dissolve about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt in there. Okay, just to get it going. Some evaporated milk.
Yep.
Okay. And then an egg. Beat that all together. Just to dissolve the salt and to blend everything. The salt is for seasoning, but a little bit of salt also strengthens the protein network. So again, it helps to get springier noodles. So I'm going to pour it in here and I'm going to start off stirring with the fork because it's going to be very lumpy at the beginning. And if I don't use the fork, it'll fly everywhere if I stick a big spatula. Okay, so you can see now this is a fairly thick, claggy kind of batter. And I'm just going to beat this now. I'm going to put some elbow grease into it. So I'm encouraging the proteins to link up and form a network so that we can have a springy noodle. So I'm beating, and then I'm also encouraging the proteins and the starch molecules to absorb the water.
And why is it that we want to do that?
Better texture noodle. Wheat flour takes a while to hydrate. If we were to mix it up and then cook it straight away, the noodles will break and they would taste rough. There's no fixed time for this beating step. It does depend on your flour.
Right,
so with today's flours, which are very well processed and consistent in quality and fineness, I don't need to beat that long. Just once I know that there are no more lumps, and I can see that. Look at
Wow,
the stretch
yeah,
that we
it's
have
so different
developed
now.
just after a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it needs to sit for 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay. Do you mind if I give it a little bit of a go?
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh my god.
So
It's not
as someone who has been baking and kneading dough
Yeah.
since they were 13 or 14,
Yeah.
I have some muscle memory to rely on now. But yeah, it's resisting you, right?
Yeah, it is. I can feel the resistance.
This is what we're going to use to shape the noodles. An Indian murukku mold made of brass, okay? So it's a hollow cylinder with a brass plate with holes in, okay? And you can imagine forcing this thick dough
Yeah.
through these small holes.
Yeah, it's
but
going to take a lot of effort.
it's absolutely possible.
Okay.
And the dough will expand once it comes through them. So
Okay.
they are thicker than that now. I need the water to be at a fairly decent, not a violent boil, but
Yep.
a steady boil, because I need to cook the noodles obviously as soon as they come out. If they don't start to cook as soon as they hit the water, they will all glom together. Yeah, so the temperature of the water is important. And look how much more stretchy that has become.
Yes.
I made this half an hour ago. Okay, this is the messiest part lah.
It's so thick. I don't see how that's gonna go through the holes easily.
Okay, let me screw the cover on. I may have to keep it on maximum. Okay, let's
Right.
see how that works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this just 2 to 3 cm just above the surface of the water, and then steadily crank up the noodles.
Okay.
Okay?
Oh, here they come. Oh. It's all, oh, look at that, strands. And they're not sticking. Do you need me to help stir
Okay.
it too? Okay, great.
And yeah,
So we need to stir
so
that.
we just gently nudge them. Okay, this water is very hot because normally they sink and they take a while to come back up. But I will cook them at this point for about 20 to 30 seconds.
Okay.
Until the water returns to boil, and then I can sense they're done. I'll tell you, Paddy, can you get the oil from behind there?
Yeah,
the little carafe of oil.
This
And
one
then
here,
use a fork or something and just put just literally a few drops.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you get the fork to just mix it
Yeah,
up.
and then just to mix it up so that they don't stick together. In the meantime, I will refill this and then we will go for a second round and you can do the next
Yeah, I
batch.
want to try. Okay.
A little bit lower, a little bit lower.
Oh, it's hot.
Yeah, you have to, so you can hold it at the edge of the pan so so
okay.
that you're not, yeah.
Man, your hands must be made of like clay or something.
I have no feelings. in
Yeah,
my
I can
fingertips
imagine all your-
Yeah, after decades of
Am I
baking.
supposed to move around the pot like
you
this?
don't have to.
Okay,
You don't
I can
have
just
to.
stay in
The-
one place,
The boiling water will splay out the noodles.
Okay, great.
But a fair bit of force, right? You feel you have to exert because the dough is so
Force of will to keep your hand there when the heat is coming up at you.
thick. These are probably done by now.
Right, so I just need to fish them out.
Yep.
Here. So just like that?
Yep, just like that. Just make sure, just shake off all the water.
Yeah, I don't know why you
I can
must-
apply
it
for the
must add to
hawker
the-
apprenticeship scheme already.
Yeah, it must add to the flavor.
Let's put these aside and then we'll get to work on the soup. So I have some plain pork and she just says slice thinly. So I'm going to see where the grain is. Going to slice thinly across the grain.
How do you tell what the grain
You,
looks like?
you can see the fibers there. So I'm just going to cut this into very thin slices. Okay, I'm going to move this aside. Could you bring back
maybe
the
get
other
this for you.
chopping board? No, it's okay.
Oh, the other one.
I want you to chop the onion for me, please.
Do I need to peel out the outer layer for this one?
No, it's okay.
It's okay,
It's
yeah.
fine. These tomatoes are not peeling very well.
Need some more hot water? And why would we want to peel the tomatoes actually?
Because Mrs. Chua says so.
Don't question Mrs. Chua.
Don't question Mrs. Chua.
Whatever she says, we're just going to follow.
And another interesting thing about this soup
Yeah.
is that as a lot of cooks in her day did as reflex, Mrs. Chua includes a little bit of gourmet powder, otherwise known as MSG. But thinking was different in the old days. People nowadays are a little bit more wary of adding stuff that doesn't need to be in their food. So MSG use is maybe not as common in cookbooks at least as it used to be. Look at your fingers, don't look at me.
Oh.
I get very nervous. If you had fewer ingredients to make a stock and you added a little bit of flavor enhancer, you could stretch them. But a lot of traditional Asian food uses fermented things like tau chio, fermented salted soybeans, soy sauce, dried seafood or meat products, and all these contain a lot of natural amino acids, which give us what we call the umami flavor, a Japanese word, umami. Today, I'm not using MSG, but this is a label sachet of this is a natural Japanese seaweed broth granules made just from dried seaweed that has been cooked into a broth and then dehydrated.
Can't wait to try that.
Okay, can you chop the garlic for me, please?
Sure,
Sorry,
no problem.
still a bit more activity. though.
No, it's fine. That's what I'm here for. Okay.
Okay, that's great.
It's okay?
That's good.
Okay,
Okay, I will let you wash all the garlic and onion off your fingers, and then I
Sure,
will tackle
you
the
go, chef.
tomatoes myself. Tomatoes so juicy that they can compress very easily if you're not careful. These are nice tomatoes.
Yeah.
Go me! I'll pat myself on the back if I could. I have here my dried shiitake mushrooms, which I've been soaking for a few hours. So I'm just going to trim off the stalks.
And I suppose this Eat More Wheat campaign as well, it's mainly concerned with food security, wasn't it?
Yeah, it arose out of a worry that we would not have enough rice to feed the population. At the time, I mean, after the campaign ended, the sort of rice shortages actually went on for a little while. Like in the early 1970s, there was actually a shortage of Thai rice specifically. And Dr. To, Chin Chai again, had to tell off people who were hoarding the rice and then selling it at inflated prices. There was like racketeering happening.
Yeah.
And at that time as well, I think the government arranged for broken rice, which was of a lower visual grade at least than the long grain rice, to be sold at CCs to help alleviate the shortage of Thai rice. So the dried shrimp I have just rinsed in water. Mr. Chua calls for immature shrimp, which I'm not sure how, it's not like
Making inappropriate jokes.
They come with an,
They don't respect their elders. All these immature shrimp.
Underdeveloped.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just using hebi because that's what we have. Sorry, Mr. Chua. I'm just going to chop them roughly. So I'm going to put some oil in my pan first.
Sure.
So let's see how hot that is.
Just
Again,
using your hand.
the traditional Asian thermometer. I'm not touching the oil, I'm just holding my hand above the surface of the oil. No, it's not quite hot yet.
But don't people have different sensitivities to temperature? How would you know? Such a subjective thermometer.
Whatever sensitivity you are born with, you can learn to use that to your advantage. Again, agak-agak, as we were saying
Right. So
earlier.
it's just calibrated to the individual.
Okay, it's sizzling, so that's hot enough.
Sizzling, okay.
So give that a good stir. And then in goes shrimp.
The shrimp.
And I want that toasted hebi flavor to come out.
Oh, I can smell it
aroma
already.
to come out, like
Yep.
hebi yam. Okay, onion goes in. Let the oil coat everything.
Okay. And we're sort of like sweating the onions at the same time.
Yes,
aren't
that's
we?
right, sweating.
Getting the moisture out of it.
I like that technical term, sweating. Yep. It'll be a light broth. Because the pork is so thin, we're going to put that in last. But once the mushrooms go in and the water goes in, all that flavor will start to leach out of the mushrooms and mingle with that of the shrimp. Okay, I'm going to dump in the mushrooms with a bit of the liquid. So we're just going to sort of get everything heated up, let the mushrooms warm up a little bit, and then we're going to pour in the rest of the mushroom soaking water and then the liquid, and then we're going to simmer that into a soup. And later on we're going to add some light soy sauce as well, just for seasoning, and then we're going to put the granules in.
Sure.
But for now, I think I will add the water now. And let's bring that to a simmer. And then we just have to wait for a while. Let the mushrooms cook through because they're still half cooked at this stage.
And I suppose all these ingredients would have been very readily available to anyone, any home cook at the time.
Yes, this is the post-war era.
Yeah.
People still had things hard sometimes, but the markets were opening up. We were slowly getting better and better supermarkets. So none of these would have been difficult for people to get.
And if I'm not wrong, the cooking competition, those were some of the criteria for the recipes, wasn't it? They were supposed to be...
The total cost of the ingredients had to be, I think, under $2 or $5. The recipes were required not to use complicated equipment. And they ruled out certain categories of things, like cakes were not allowed because you needed an oven. Not everyone had an oven. The recipe ideally had to be done in 30 minutes. And I'll tell you honestly, looking through the recipes, very few of them take under 30 minutes. And the last thing we're going to put in are the pork and the tomatoes. I'm going to put in a little bit of my
Our umami
umami agent.
Yes.
Okay, and then I'm going to put in the tomatoes at this point. Okay, I'm going to put the pork in.
Okay.
And drop the heat a little bit. Okay, and I think we can dish up.
Sure.
And then we can sprinkle the spring onions on top, and then we're ready to go.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. And then wait. We have now they all do this.
Oh,
right now.
you want to do that? It turned out really nicely.
I'm really happy with how this turned out, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something that my mom would make.
Yeah.
It has that home cooked taste.
Mm.
You know, like a bit of a taste of home.
I think what well-written, well-expressed home cooking recipes from that era, what they can teach you is that you don't need a lot of ingredients and you don't need super fancy ingredients to make a really decent meal. Which is, I'm sure a part of the Eat More Wheat campaign was geared towards that as well.
Do you feel like food has this sort of property of like communication through time and through the ages?
Absolutely. Food carries a lot of meaning. Food carries a lot of power. Okay? 3 times a day we have the chance to perform an act that recalls memories, that bonds people together if you cook a meal together, that expresses someone's artistic impulses. You go to a meal, have a meal made by a very creative chef or cook. You could have a meal that cements your family heritage. The act of cooking and the act of sitting down and eating, they carry so much potential within them to create other things.
I am definitely very surprised by this recipe. The idea of making something like this really surprised me, and I'm looking forward to being a bit more conscious of how I make my food and how I prepare it and how I feed myself.
Good on you.
Yeah.
I'm sure Mrs. Chua would be very happy.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Chua.
Thank you, Mrs. Chua.
Wherever you are. We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. I had a great time with Christopher, learning about the Eat More Wheat campaign and recreating the milk noodle dish. I'm Paddy, and this is From Book to Cook.